many of you here today, and I hope we learn a lot from our very distinguished panel here. Get my notes out. This is the sixth in our series of year-long First Friday Forums. Today is April 4th, 2025, and we are meeting in the Lexington Community Center. I am Margaret Copey, convener of the League of Women Voters of Lexington. The League is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to promoting awareness and understanding of public policy issues. All program events are free and open to the public. Today's program is being recorded by LexMedia for future showing. Check their website for the dates. And thank you to LexMedia for recording this. And thank you to all those of you who've come here today to join us. Today's topic is Accessory Dwelling Units, or ADUs. We are pleased to host a panel discussion on the Affordable Homes Act, is that the correct thing? Thank you. And how to plan, design, finance, and build your own ADU. Panelists will discuss the benefits and pitfalls of ADUs, new opportunities created by the Affordable Homes Act, and answer your questions. Do you want to introduce the panel members? Okay.
Thank you. I would like to thank the League for inviting us to do this. I'm Charles Hornig. I'm representing the Lexington Housing Partnership, who are the co-sponsors of this event. And I would like to introduce our panel. I'm going to be moderating and giving a brief introduction, but Tim O'Reilly is the director of pre-construction and backyard ADUs, a full-service design build company that specializes in designing and building ADUs. They've built quite a few of them, and Tim, you can give your more detailed introduction later. Jennifer Conroy, here, wave your hand or something so people know who you are. From Cambridge Savings Bank, we'll be talking about financing an ADU. We have Olivia Lawler, the zoning administrator, Bruce Dempsey, our assistant building commissioner, here to talk about permitting issues. And finally, Todd Burger is the proud owner of an ADU who can talk about what it's like to actually have one. So again, really appreciate having this crowd here. So I will get started with a really brief. So for those of you who, when I say ADU, don't know what I mean, an accessory dwelling unit. In the very broadest terms, we're talking about a second dwelling unit that's smaller than the main dwelling unit on a property, but it could be the place that a separate household lives. It's also known as an accessory apartment, an in-law apartment, a basement apartment, a cottage, an ahana dwelling. A lot of different things. And it can be physically take a lot of different forms. It may be a detached cottage. It may be attached to the house. It may be in an attic. It may be in a basement. It may be above a garage. Lots of different possibilities for location. The main point is it's a place where someone who's not sharing the household can live. And we've had these in Lexington for some time. First of all, before 1924, you could do it because we didn't have zoning in Lexington, so there were no rules against it. And we had a lot of them in 1920, already in 1924, basement apartments and so forth. 1924, we put in single-family zoning in Lexington. Pretty much they became illegal. For the next 50 years, people built them anyway, often without building permits. That became, around 1980, that became an issue because everybody knew that there were hundreds of these apartments in Lexington out there that were not getting inspected properly or taken care of properly because we didn't allow them, so no one would report them. So finally in 1983, we changed the zoning to permit, with a lot of restrictions, accessory apartments, which is our word for ADUs. There were a lot of restrictions, but it was very much intended to give people an opportunity to go and take their ADU that got built illegally 20 years before, go to the building department and get it taken care of. Since then, over the last 40 years, we've done 3 rounds of changes to the zoning. In each case, we've removed restrictions. So we've been trying to make it easier and easier to build them. There are still significant restrictions. There were still significant restrictions up until last February. But we have been relaxing them. We've been seeing more and more opportunities for people to build these. In fact, 9 of them got building permits last year, which is quite a bit up from the 1 or 2 a year we would do 10 years ago. The big change is in 1925, February 2nd, the Affordable Homes Act, which is a state law, took effect, and it said that smaller ADUs, and we'll get to that actually more. So as of this year, smaller ADUs, and there's a complicated definition of what counts. The simple version is more or less than 900 square feet. And our building people can talk about the subtleties if you want to know, are permitted by right with a building permit, independent of most of the remaining restrictions in Lexington zoning bylaw. So they're permitted in any zoning district where 1-family homes are permitted. And that includes, the RT and CN districts, basically the 2-family districts. You can now have an ADU in the 2-family district, is the important thing there. They can be either within a dwelling, attached to a dwelling, or detached, all by right. So right now you need a special permit for a detached accessory apartment. Now it would be by right if it's within that size. There are no occupancy restrictions. You can have your family live there, you can have a friend live there, you can rent it out. Whatever you want to do, without the owner occupancy requirement that we currently impose. There are still rules, still has the same setback and height limits as the main dwelling, but it doesn't have any special limits. And this does not affect all the other permits you might need. You're still going to need a building permit. It's still going to need to meet the building code. If you're near or in wetlands, you're going to have to deal with the wetlands implications. If you're going to have to deal with the stormwater that comes off of it and infiltrate it into the ground or do something to keep it from causing downstream flooding. If you're going to be taking down trees that are under the jurisdiction of the tree bylaw, you'll have to deal with that, again, in the same way as if you were building any other building. And we aren't getting rid of the larger accessory apartments that you can currently build. They keep their current restrictions, but these new ones are much easier to permit, much easier to build. And this will get posted on the league website in the calendar entry for this, some links for you. But next, I think we'll go to Tim O'Reilly from Backyard ADUs. You can briefly introduce yourself and we can move some cables.
Thank you. Is this working?
So you have a big connector or a little connector? A little one. This is
I got my slides in too late. Hopefully it'll work here.
Charles, do you need to move your laptop so you can?
Oh, yeah.
That's perfect. All right.
Next.
All right. Awesome. So thank you, Charles, and thank you to the League for having me today. I'm Tim. I'm with Backyard ADUs. We've been building accessory dwelling units in small homes since 2019. We've learned a lot along the way. So I'm excited to share that with you guys today. We're building 2 right now in Lexington. So there's some specific nuggets of knowledge that I learned. And then we have the wonderful folks from the building department and zoning department who can also answer your questions. But why are we here, this crisis? The zoning overview is single family zoning. There's also this economic problem of, hey, people are incentivized to build bigger and bigger houses. And especially as we have this older generation aging, we lack the inventory of small houses. We've built, I think, 70 units to date, and only one of them has been for a rental. Everything else is for family, multi-generational living. And it's trying to find this missing, small home market. So the Affordable Homes Act is passed, which is fantastic. Statewide, zooming out, this is pushing everybody in the right direction. Lexington already had their rules that predated this. But this has been really, really exciting as we look to tackle the housing crisis, to push municipalities, especially those who did not have rules or had rules that were sort of prohibitive to allow housing to be built. Let me see if I hit full screen. Great. There's our governor. We're really lucky to have her at the forefront pushing housing. So I don't have a lot of time. We can't get into all the nitty-gritty details, but this is the question we really want to ask ourselves. I'm obviously biased when it comes to accessory dwelling units. I think they are housing that we need in our communities. We're finding as we're designing these spaces, everyone wants to know about the number. How much size can I build? What do I need? 800 square feet for us is a sweet spot. Once we get to 800 square feet, you're in a comfortable 2-bedroom, 1-bath, open concept kitchen living room. The state rules now, hey, you can get up to 900 square feet. Awesome. Someone wants a bigger kitchen. Someone needs a bigger closet. We're also always typically thinking with accessibility in mind, single-story living. That extra couple hundred square feet gives us a little more room around the toilet. Let's think down the road, maybe there's a caretaker to help you navigate in and out of the shower, navigate the kitchen. Maybe now you can do a side-by-side laundry. So square feet does matter. That 800 to 900 square feet is a sweet spot. If you are here in Lexington and want to go the special permit route, you can go up to the 1,000 square feet. But 800 square feet gets people into that 2-bedroom versus if you're smaller than that, you're really getting more of an oversized 1-bedroom. And as folks are making the investment to do this, that extra couple hundred square feet is incrementally not that expensive compared to the whole project. Here in Massachusetts, we're building net zero ready. So we're not putting the solar on top of the roof, but we're meeting the HERS 45 or less, all electric homes. So if you do, folks decide, hey, we do want solar, hopefully they'll be net zero. We do have to spend some money, and we're going to look at costs here in a bit. Heat pump, hot water heater, air sealing, etc., to get there. But it's a high performance home, and that's where the energy code has been progressively pushing builders over the past 5 years to start to meet those stretch energy requirements, and I'm sure you can speak more to that as well. When we get into costs and thinking about our community, we're infilling and we're reusing infrastructure, which is great. So unfortunately, the past 5 years, with the way things have gone with cost, things have not gotten cheaper. But when families are looking to build an ADU or potentially investors, it's like, hey, you already have that property and the land and the infrastructure, and we're looking to piggyback on those. We were talking about it a little bit before the presentation, but there are stipulations in the bylaw about how does this affect the character of our neighborhood. This is a gentle increase in density. We're not building glass boxes in people's backyards. We're in New England here, where we have a variety of architectural styles and features, and these things, whether they're in the front yard, the side yard, or the backyard, typically don't stand out. So it's sort of a gentle way to push that density. I always hammer home this point of it is an investment, but it gives families options. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people that we build for, it's for family members, whether it's adult children moving into the backyard, parents moving into the backyard, but you need to plan for now and later. So let's think about how you're going to use it, next year, in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, and have control over that. One of the beauties of the Affordable Homes Act is removing the owner occupancy requirement, so that families do have another option if maybe they do want to rent. This house here was actually just there yesterday in Concord. The subtle benefits of these, and I honestly didn't really recognize this until I've been in this field and been in houses with homeowners. But a mother built this in her daughter's backyard. Her son-in-law came in yesterday while I was there and said, hey, we're ordering Chinese food. Do you want anything? And she said, no, thank you. And he left. But if she wasn't in the backyard, that interaction may not have happened. I've been in ADUs before, and homeowners have told me, hey, I didn't even realize, but my grandkids can now walk over. They have a quiet place to do their homework. I didn't ever think that as a grandparent, I would be providing that space, but the physical ADU does provide that. And it's bringing families together, which, again, I'm biased, but I think this is a great way to sort of stitch the fabric of our communities together. Cost, right? Oh, man, everyone, it comes down to cost. 2019, when we started doing this, we were building ADUs, and that first number could have started with 1. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. So when we're getting up to that 800 to 900 square feet, it's a chunk of change. Honestly, the hardest days for me at work is someone calls up and said, hey, I have $200,000 in cash. I need this for my mom. And it's like, well, we need to go find a financing partner, right? We're going to have a little bit of a gap. I didn't put it in today. There's the home modification loan program through the state where you can get 50 grand. So there are some ways out there. We are getting some energy rebates. But as we zoom out and look at the broad landscape, ADUs are still the cheapest form of housing here in our communities. As we look at costs of single family homes, this is probably not a single family house in Lexington. I haven't looked at the market here. And this always astounds me when we talk to nonprofit or developers looking at, condo apartment styles. Those are really expensive too. So unfortunately, we can't cross that off and put a 1 there anymore. But looking at the broad landscape, it is affordable. Everyone always asks me, what's the cost per square foot, right? You go on Zillow, cost per square foot. It's not a great way to look at accessory dwelling units because we have to sort of look at the base cost. I work all the time with homeowners to figure out what are we actually building? Do you want the bigger closet? Do we need the accessible bathroom? That's all the fun stuff where we can play around with our design. But we have our base, what are our utilities? What do we need to do for foundation? Are we doing a basement? Is there ledge on site? Are we doing stormwater conservation, things like that are inherently going to cost more money? And then sort of what's there and what are we doing? Are we doing driveways and walkways? Do we have to transplant stuff? So cost per square foot looks more expensive when we're only building 900 square feet because we have to have, sort of these base pieces. Shameless plug at Backyard ADUs. We're always trying to de-risk for folks. Hey, let's not go out and start spending that money. Let's try to figure out where we're going to be ballpark before you start spending thousands and thousands of dollars doing surveys and designs, etc. We do that through a site visit, looking, where are we going to identify this base and try to get to that. Let's look and have a comprehensive overview of the utilities so we can start to plan ahead of time and ballpark those. Here in Lexington, the 2 we're building, I wanted to highlight these. We had to do conservation for both. That involved a pretty comprehensive site plan, as well as, protections, and we'll see here in a second. So silt socks, fences, all of these things. At the end of the day, people ask me, hey, how is this going to impact me? And my analogy is it's a speed bump, but it's not a barrier. It's going to take more time. It's going to cost a little bit more money. But we work with the town, we work with the qualified professionals to address them, overcome the hurdles. And our folks in Lexington are going to get their CO next week, and our other project will get one in a couple months. So again, just speed bumps to overcome. In one case, we had to do septic work. So, you need to go through the Board of Health, again, bring in the qualified professionals. They only meet once a month. So, you got to get your stuff in advance. Again, you can see how this can compound and add time and cost, but in the end, you can get a brand new, awesome, fancy piece of concrete in your backyard. Pretty impressive when they do tank installs. Stormwater is just the other one, is to say, hey, Charles mentioned it earlier, how are we addressing runoff? This is in the backyard of our project in Lexington. It doesn't look like it, but that's about $20,000 buried in the earth of tank and pipe and stone, and all of their new roof runoff is going to go into there, as well as a rain garden. So again, a speed bump. This one's not cheap. You have to do it the right way, but it doesn't kill a project. So ADUs are easy to build more ADUs. We build primarily detached and attached ADUs. We don't do renovations of garages or basements or attics, but we're really lucky to have you today to talk about your project, because that is the whole realm, so we can get that broad view of ADUs. So thank you. All right, we'll switch back.
Do you want to do your own slides?
I guess. What do I do?
Sure.
Just
Forward arrow here.
oh,
Next one.
hello. Is that working?
Is it on?
Is it working? Yeah. Okay. Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Conroy, and here with Cambridge Savings Bank, and I'm just going to touch on not the most exciting portion of the presentation, but financing. It's important. So more than happy to kind of discuss the overview, and then certainly any specific questions. Everything is sort of a case-by-case basis, so always happy to review. Again, we're with Cambridge Savings Bank, and we are a local bank and definitely committed to affordable housing and just supporting the communities in which we serve. So really there's like three main ways that you can sort of access funds via mortgage to assist, like a cash out refinance on your primary residence, the home equity line or a home equity loan, or a full construction loan. And we'll kind of go through some of the differences there. So a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan would be really a nice, great way to do it. If you already have enough equity in that property to pay for not the 100, but the $200,000 or $300,000 that you might need for that unit. So if you have equity in your property, maybe you already have a first mortgage and you were lucky enough to finance in the 2020s, so you have a beautiful low interest rate. That's okay, you can keep that and then add on a line of credit or loan. You can go up to 80% loan to value. For a loan, you can actually go up to 85% loan to value, and that would be on the existing value of your home today. So for many people that, there's enough equity really to go ahead and use that. Again, it can be in first or second lien position. So if your house is fully paid, that's okay. You can use one of these products as well. So there is a distinction. If you're going to be using your house for an equity line or loan, we don't really want the structure to be impacted. So if you're busting out walls and adjusting roof lines and increasing the footprint, that's going to be a better fit for a construction loan. So for an equity line, it works beautifully for a detached unit. We'll work with that, that's fine. Also, if you're going to just convert an over the garage unit or a basement, if you're not impacting the actual footprint and structure, we would be okay with that. So there's a lot of flexibility that you have in that regard. The nice thing about these loans, there's no closing costs. You can go ahead and get it in place, while you're finalizing all of your permits and things with the city. You can go ahead, get that line in place, and you can take out more than you think you may need, because you're only going to be paying interest on that loan when you draw against it. So you can just sort of have it there ready to go, and then you can start writing checks, and little by little you'll start to pay interest on that money back. The other nice thing about this is that, as the bank, we're not going to be involved. You have sort of control. You're going to write the checks, you're going to work with your contractor, and you're going to kind of manage your own project and kind of pay them as you go. So in that sense, I think, a home equity line really is a great way to go. It gives you quite a lot of flexibility. Now, once your project is done, you know exactly how much you've made, and you have still a little bit left. You can use that to furnish, you can use that, etc. And you can also then opt to lock that portion in on a fixed rate loan. So you have a lot of flexibility. So again, this is if you have equity in your property, enough to pay, and you have, definitely many options in terms of how you use that money. Another option similar to that would be you don't have a loan, or maybe you have a higher interest rate. You can just do a new first mortgage, just refinance, pull cash out. Sometimes you're going to get a lower interest rate. You could lock it in on a 15-year fix, something of that sort. So in that sense, it may offer a lower interest rate long term. It may be a better option for you. There are going to be some costs, closing costs, etc. The sort of, whenever you're going to go with a loan, you have to kind of know how much you're going to borrow. So you have flexibility with your own reserves. You kind of have an idea, okay, I'm going to need $250,000 really to get me through the hump. Then you can go ahead, move forward. You want to get this done before you start your project. So you want to get the money. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you're going to do the refinance, is that you'll pay, start once the loan closes, you're paying on that interest and principal from day one. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if you really know, you have a good feeling on what your budget, what the cost, this could be a beautiful option for you as well. And again, you want to start this before you start work, because once work starts on the property, oftentimes that can impact the appraisal. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then the last option really would be what they call a construction loan. And so this is applicable if you don't have enough equity in the property at this time to pay for the project, or if you are going to be bumping out the footprint or doing major structural work to the actual primary residence. What happens on a construction loan is you're going to work with your contractor, and you're going to have your plans, your specifications, and your budget. Everything is in a package. So when you apply for the loan, you're going to submit all of that information, and that's what we'll use to appraise your property. So we'll go in and appraise the actual future value of that dwelling unit. So that allows you then to really finance that if you didn't have that there. So we're going to look at the as completed value of that unit. And then in addition to that, we're going to be involved sort of as a second set of eyes for you. Some people like that because they might not be comfortable with working with contractors and understanding how that goes. So they like the idea that the bank's in sort of doing a second check. So what happens is that the money goes into an escrow account, and then as you hit your budget milestones or your project milestones, we'll go out, re-inspect, and then we'll go ahead and issue the disbursement. And it can run from 4 to 6 disbursements throughout the project. Depends really on how extensive it is, and it could be quite a bit less. But we'll sit down prior to closing with the contractor, with the lender, and with you as the owner, kind of go through the process so you feel comfortable with how everything will work. And then, once the project is completed, we just turn that loan right into a full repayment. You don't have to go through anything over again, and we're off and running. So it really works out well. We do a lot of construction loans, so it is really a nice option. It is more expensive in terms of closing costs, but sometimes that, it does really help to sort of bridge that gap, and it gives you that second, set of eyes, so to speak, on the project. So essentially, home equity lines, home equity loans, or construction, lots of options, and every situation is going to be a little bit different, just as all of the permitting as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And we'll do all the questions at the end. There'll be plenty of time for questions.
All right. Good morning. I'm Olivia Lawler. I'm the zoning administrator. I work closely to review all the permits that come in, and with anyone who's interested in starting an ADU, we're always there to help you understand what it is you need to do, how to get that permit, and what type of ADU you qualify for. Things to consider before you are going into your ADU. First, you want to know what type of ADU it is you want to build. If you're going for that Affordable Homes Act 900 square feet or less, that will be your easiest path. And as some other people have mentioned, there are things to consider before permitting, such as wetlands. Do you have any conservation land that falls into conservation jurisdiction? In that case, there will be some more things you have to do before that building permit. Also, historical status of your home. If you have a historical home or in a historic district, those will still be the same process you would go through for any type of changes to your property. So if you are adding an addition in a historic district, you would have to go for a review for that. There may be slightly different regulations because, as we know, this 900 square foot ADU is by right, but you would still have to go through that review. You always want to think about existing site conditions, meaning what are your current setbacks and what are the current topography on your property. All those things are going to affect the plans that your architect or your builder will put forward for you. As Tim also mentioned, something like the sewage disposal system can affect what you need to do. If you are an on-site with not town sewer, and if you have septic, that is something you have to consider, and the load that your current septic tank has. If you're adding bedrooms to your house, health department does have to ensure that that septic tank can handle it. So that's something else you have to be ready to consider and to also potentially pay for and take slightly more time for your process. Applying for your permit is pretty easy these days. It's all done online, so you can do that any time of the day or night. You and your contractor can work together. It can be you who applies for it, or it can be the contractor. If you are doing a new construction though, like a detached ADU, that is when your contractor will have to be the one to apply. And that's just so we can ensure that they have the proper licenses and also insurance. And that protects you from their work and what they're doing on your property. The additional cost for permits is $100 per $1,000 of proposed work. And what that proposed work includes is the material and the labor. So even if you have a friend doing it who's giving you a discount, you still have to put in the proposed work as if it was anyone else and what overall that cost would be. When people apply for permits, it's approximately a 1 month time frame in order to get issued that permit. This can change based on what is appropriately provided to us. If anything is missing or if certain departments need some more information from you, they leave comments or they give you a call to talk about what it is they're looking for. But overall, if you're doing a detached ADU, that will be approximately a 1 month time frame to get that permit issued. And once you get that permit issued, you are free to start your work. And as that process goes on, we have multiple inspection steps that our building inspectors will do along with any electrical and plumbing and gas permits that are pulled. Once all your inspections are completed, you will get a final inspection, and as long as that passes, then you'll go on to get your certificate of occupancy as long as your plans match what we approved. The common required documents can change slightly depending on what you are proposing. If you are proposing an attached ADU, something in your attic or a garage conversion or a basement ADU, there are slightly less application requirements just because we don't need something like a plot plan to show where this new structure is going to be. Or we don't need a height calculation form because you're not building anything new. Now, what our inspectors always say is what you need to apply for with the building permit is something that if they look at it, they can go out and build that structure. So what that means is they need to have full floor plans, structural plans, and all the plans that they could go build it themselves. If we don't have this, it might take a little longer to review your permit because they're going to be looking for those and adding time to get those so that they can review properly. The department reviews all happen within that building permit. It's a nice, easy process because it is all online and it all happens at the same time. Now, some of these, depending on your property, may be skipped, like Historical Commission or Historic District Commission if you're not in one of those relevant groups. Additionally, Planning Board, if you're not on what we call an unaccepted street, that could be skipped. But either way, every permit is reviewed by all these departments. And as mentioned before, some of these departments, such as conservation, will have that review that if they see wetlands, they might flag it, and you may have to go back if you were unaware and get a wetland delineation and go through the conservation department review, as some of our previous permits have done. Other things to think about is sustainability, and if you're going to be an all electric property, or if you're taking your gas or natural fuel from your home over to this new unit. And additionally, fire department will review to ensure that smoke detectors are there, that all the fire rated walls are properly located, and all of those things.
Okay, if you have a attached, or you are using part of the original house as your ADU, one of the things you have to have is fire separation. And that can be very tricky. And typically, from the building standpoint, we would say to you, you need to have an architect or an engineer come up with a design that we can approve. Okay? So as far as fire separation goes, a detached would be easier than the attached or within the existing building. Not insurmountable, but something you need to realize that there could be additional cost for that purpose. And you still have to have two means of egress out of the ADU. Zoning considers it one structure, but as far as the building code goes, it's considered two structures. Be considered two family for building code purposes. Is that the end of your slide?
Yes.
Can you go back to the first slide, please? Okay. Okay. I have had a couple of conversations with people who have wanted to do additions. And the first item up there, wetlands, it doesn't just mean wetlands, it could be conservation land, it could be, there's a 25-foot no build, there's a 50-foot limited, there's the 100-foot buffer, and anybody who's considering adding on to their house or doing a separate, I would say your first step before you get involved at all is to go through conservation and find out where your lot is and what you're up against. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Tim. I'm the glass is half full. Well, I'm not the guy that's half full, I'm the glass is half empty, okay? I look at the worst case scenario and what you're up against. And to me, wetlands is the number one thing, okay? Now, once you get beyond that, next slide, please. Okay. Homeowner or licensed contractor can apply. We strongly suggest you get a contractor. Unless you actually have building experience, you have no clue what you're up against. Okay? I don't want to take anything away from the people who want to do the self projects. I've done many of them myself. And I'm a firm believer in Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will, and at the worst possible moment, and it's going to cost you more money than you thought. Okay? We can help at the building department, but we're not here to design your project. We're here to make sure what you want to build complies to code and all the building requirements. Okay? Inspections, there are a number of inspections that come both building, electrical, plumbing, mechanical. Okay? Next slide, please. Plot plan. New construction or addition. It has to be done by a registered land surveyor. If you have a mortgage plot plan, they typically do not have any measurements on there, and I cannot tell you whether you can comply with zoning guidelines for setbacks. Next. as Olivia said, all these people have to look at this, okay? They're not all in town hall. By building code, when someone asks me how long it takes to get a permit, the standard answer I have to give, which is in the building code, is it can take up to 30 days for the permit to be issued, as long as all the information submitted complies and all these people look at it and sign off. One of the big things that has happened recently is if you're doing an addition or remodel especially, the health department is looking for a hazard survey, which they're looking to see if there is asbestos anywhere near the project, okay? It has become a big surprise to a lot of people. They enacted this the first of the year, and everybody calls me up and says, what's this? And it's like, call the Board of Health, okay? I'm a firm believer in staying in my lane. Okay, next one. I missed the one. Lexington is fossil fuel free, okay? So if you're doing an addition, you cannot extend any gas pipe or put in bigger gas supplied units or oil supplied units. You cannot have gas fireplaces. You can have a wood burning stove because they are not, wood is not a fossil fuel. Okay? And I think that's all I have.
Morning. I'm here with my wife, Todd Burger. We're the co-owners of this project. Do you advance, or is it?
Sure.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So we've been in Lexington 35 years. When we moved here, we moved into a brand new Grand Cape. But on the back of the property was this horse barn. There's been a horse barn there for 150 years. This particular one's been there for 85 years. And it was a little special to us, despite how it looks on the outside. It's got nice bones, as builders sometimes say. You can see from the inside framing. When we moved in, we did have a tenant before this was classified as an ADU. It was fairly large, about this big. It was a raccoon. It had some structural rot to it, but actually we were married in this barn 35 years ago, and so even though we wanted to do something with it, we didn't want to tear it down. So that's what it looks when we were partway through the demolition. That rot you saw was over those windows in the back. We wanted to take this barn and turn it into a usable garage for us where you could bring in two cars side by side. The original door was wide enough for one car. We didn't want to spend a lot of money upgrading the electric when the structure had structural damage and wasn't very usable on the upper level. And so we said, let's find a way to reuse the whole structure. Turn it into a 3.5 car garage below, with storage for cars, bikes. We wanted a shed for yard tools. My wife wanted a greenhouse, which I wanted to give her if she was going to live through this project with me. But we ran into problems. Now, I've built things before in my life, even though I was a management consultant for most of my career in transportation. I'd done my share of building, so I wasn't surprised by some things. We found that the front third of the structure had a deficient foundation that had been sinking actually 2 or 3 inches. So that had to be fixed, among other things. We also found a large tree stump under one of the 4 critical pillars in the middle of the barn. But here was where we started. We wanted a net zero design. I don't have this in the slide, but we also wanted an accessible structure. So we wanted every single doorway to be 36 inches. We wanted a staircase wide enough to add a stair chair to the apartment on the upper level if that was needed by anybody. And we wanted to exceed all the building codes in 2019. I believe we still exceed those codes today. Tim talked about HERS ratings. It's very unusual to get a HERS rating below 45 on an old building that's being renovated. We ended up at 39. So the lower you go, the better, by the way, on that. We wanted a 1,200 square foot building. You'll see that's not what we ended up with. And before I go any further, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. You're going to hear some critical remarks by me. They are criticisms of the regulations and some of the rules, both at the town level and at the state level. They are not criticisms of our building department or our board, so I have tremendous respect for it. And were very helpful as we went through this process. So we found a builder. We went through 23 builders before we picked one. A little bit unusual in this case, I took back 4,000 hours of work on a project. You may wonder where that went. Well, I did the electrical, my wife and I together did the tiling. I did all the interior, second, third floor framing inside the unit. Did the ceilings, the floors, all the landscaping, stonework, painting, and built all the cabinets. So that's where that time went. It was owner financed with a little bit of a HELOC and a lot of savings. This is what it looks like today. You know, when you hear people talk about worrying about, well, what's this going to do to the fabric of our community? Remember how that building looked before we started, and this is how it looks now. You'll see from a shot at the end how it fits in with the house. And I want to point out there's a second egress staircase on the back. I could talk about how we ended up with that for about an hour. So if you have questions, we'll save that to the end. That's how it looks in the interior. It's one bedroom plus a study, a bath with a heated floor, very upscale appliances and cabinets. Why did we do this? Well, our thought was maybe one of our parents someday would move into that unit. That didn't happen. But we also said maybe someday we'll move in and rent the house. Another way to stay in Lexington in later years with, or we'll stay in the house, but we'll have a caretaker live in the unit. So we wanted it to be designed the way we would like to live in it. So we didn't end up at 1,200 square feet. We had an architect who, he kept saying one phrase over and over for the 2 years that we dealt with him, as I forced him to make various changes. Lexington will never let you build this. He was almost right. So one of the problems was, with an existing building and adding 5 feet to allow 2 cars, we ended up with a logical footprint that would have produced a 1,200 square foot apartment. That was clear we weren't going to get that through the Board of Appeals. I believe that the town's square foot limit and the state's square foot limit are inappropriate. If you think about people today living in 3, 4, 5, 6,000 square foot houses wanting to move into a 900 square foot unit or 800 square foot unit, is not that likely. 1,200 would have made a lot more sense. We had to, I'll show you in the last slide, the change we made to get it down to 1,040, which we still needed a favorable vote for from the Board of Appeals. And by the way, if you have to go through the Board of Appeals for your ADU, you don't need 3 votes, you need 4 votes. So out of the 5. We also needed a setback variance because of the 5 feet we were adding on one side. We had neighbors that were very supportive of that. In fact, those neighbors were our first tenants in the apartment as they remodeled their house a couple years later. We had issues with getting a driveway design accepted that would allow access to both of our garages and adequate space for our tenant. Thankfully, we were able to come up with something that was acceptable. You'll run into some other things. You've heard folks talk from the town this morning. Some of them were surprising to us. We didn't understand that we wouldn't be able to hook up the water and sewer from this apartment above the garage to the street. They had to be hooked up to our existing sewer line and our existing water service. which meant they had to come into our house to do the water service. So that was a complication we weren't expecting. Somehow the code ended up requiring us to have 5 cleanouts on about a 110-foot sewer line, which 3 of them were, in my view, unnecessary, but that's the way the code is, and we complied with it. One of the interesting things that happened was that the Board of Appeals wouldn't allow us to have a separate address. The engineering department, following the Board of Appeals ruling, wasn't going to give us a separate address for the building. But then the fire department wouldn't issue the occupancy permit without a separate address, because if there was an alarm, they wanted to know which building to come to. It took the town, and I understand this was 2019 to 2021. Others in the town can maybe comment if this has changed, and if it hasn't, I would urge them to change it. It took 3.5 months for the various town departments to agree on whether the barn would be 386A Lincoln Street, B Lincoln Street, 386R Lincoln Street, or something else. We were hoping B for barn, but it ended up R, and we said, okay, at least you gave us that. We thought we were done, but then we discovered that there was one more problem, that the Postal Service didn't recognize the address because the engineering department hadn't issued the address, just the fire department. We found a way around that with the Postal Service. I'll answer questions about that later. We had one interesting barrier that some of you may experience. If you or your family or your sons or daughters help with some of the project and you spend some of the money outside of the builder, we had trouble getting construction insurance that would cover the work that I did. And at 4,000 hours, we're talking, a couple hundred thousand dollars in investment. So our architect was almost right, but wrong. We must have done something right. We've actually won 4 awards for the project. I've got 3 of the ones that I remember listed here. The builder kept calling us every few months afterwards, because telling us they had submitted this for various award things and received them. Our first tenants moved into their house when it was finished about 2 years ago. We have a young, just married couple that's been in there for about 1.5 years now. We did have some adjustments, and I will tell you, it took a while for me to get used to the idea of someone else coming up and down the driveway that wasn't coming to see us or wasn't us. But the rental income, which is substantial, makes it a lot easier for us to remain in Lexington. Maybe not for another 35 years, but we hope for another 10 or 20. We have very nice neighbors. We have really enjoyed all the tenants we have had in the unit. The unit is fully functional. We can park 2 cars while our daughter is in Spain with her husband and our grandchild this week. Theirs is the 3rd car parked in the front position behind, in front of my car. And it complements our home. So that's part of our home, which goes another 45 feet to the right. There's the barn with its matching siding and faux barn doors on top. And one thing we realized, which we hadn't planned for, was we realized we needed a second mailbox. We needed a mailbox with 2 doors, one for the tenants, one for us. For about a year, we were sifting through mail to divide it between us and the tenants. But that side of that mailbox had been hit 3 times by plows and delivery trucks. So I spent a year building this mailbox, which is a precise scale replica of the barn, with motion sensors to trigger video cameras and lighting, including a strobe light I put on for the town plows anytime it snows, which I can control from my phone. I could turn it on right here. So that's what we have. There's a video online. If any of you want this link, I could email it to you, explaining how we did the net zero design, which we stuck with. This building is, the barn is super insulated. We've got something like R60 in the roof and R32 in the walls, 3 heat pumps, a heat pump for heating and cooling, a heat pump for a heat pump hot water heater, and a heat pump dryer that's not vented. So that's our story. Thanks very much.
And I'd like to thank our panel for helping us and all of you for coming, but we would like to take your questions for anyone in the panel.
Yeah, and please use the microphone so that everyone can hear.
Hi, thank you guys for putting this on. My name is Eve Eisenberg. I'm with Inkstone Architects, and we have designed and built several ADUs, some in Lexington, one actually with backyard ADU folks, which was super, super fun. And we do plans for additions and renovations for people's houses who want them inside their houses as well. I have 2 questions. The first ADU we did was a long time ago, it was like 2015. And at the time we needed 2 means of egress, as Bruce mentioned. Also my business partner, Brigitte, is your neighbor, Todd, and has been through your house with Platt. But anyway, the 2 means of egress, both of them had to be covered stairways. One inside and one outside, because this ADU was going above a garage. So that was my first question, because I saw a bare naked staircase coming down Todd's ADU. I wonder if that regulation has been released. And my second question, and I kind of don't want to open this can of worms, if nobody wants to talk about this, that's fine, but the second ADU we did in Lexington, there was some worry that it would be used as an Airbnb. And I just want to know what, maybe I stepped in it, but anyway, if you don't want to talk about that, but Olivia, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, of course. So we do still have the regulation that exterior stairs to the 2nd floor do need to be enclosed. So any type of egress with stairs on the outside do have to be within that building shell. And that's only if it's one of the Lexington ADUs. If you're a protected use ADU under the Affordable Homes Act, that regulation is removed and those stairs can be uncovered. As for short-term rentals, it is still Lexington policy that ADUs cannot be used as short-term rentals. Short-term rental is anything under 30 days rented.
I can add that when the Board of Appeals gave us the approvals, there was a specific clause that precludes us from ever renting it as an Airbnb. We never had that as a goal. I would not like that. We wanted stable tenancy of people that we liked, knowing that they were living on our property. Staircase story is we weren't required to enclose it at the time. We actually tried to do something different. We didn't want that structure outside because mostly you see external staircases with all kinds of supporting structure. Frankly, I think they're architecturally unattractive. So what we tried to do was to get the town to accept something where you do fire suppression on the escape route, fire suppression just on the exit stairway and exit foyer. That ran us into an issue where the town wanted us to get the state fire marshal to approve that plan. And we could have gone down that path if we wanted to wait 6 months to 2 years. And so finally I gave up on that and we did the staircase, but we did it in a way without its cantilevered structure out of the back of the barns. We didn't need ugly supporting wood or concrete or other structures outside, and with an aluminum frame underneath it, so it was light looking, and then wire cable.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say, on our current ADUs in Chelmsford and Littleton, where there are far fewer regulations for some reason, I don't really know. Lexington's fabulous though. It has been a struggle to get it under 1,000 square feet, and I realize the state code that some of the towns like Lexington and Concord follow require new additions to be less than 1,000 square feet, but 1,200, what Todd said, is really a critical number for people who are moving. We work for families, the young families with little kids, but also for people aging in place. When you're trying to contain all of the stuff that you want to keep, 1,200 is like this critical number where if you go under it, there's just not enough storage. So I just want to put that out there that maybe someday we can have slightly bigger ADUs.
I'll just jump on that real quick. I sometimes joke that part of my job is counseling. How do we figure out what's going on, all this stuff to get into that space? But just back to the Airbnb point, I think it's sort of a political football of, we don't want this in our community. You see a lot on the Cape of towns saying, hey, we're going to enact those short-term restrictions. Our empirical data, 70 houses, only one was built as a rental. It was actually built for medical professionals. Right now, where costs have gone up, where interest rates are higher, it just doesn't pencil out for investors. People aren't building these as Airbnbs. It doesn't work on their sheet. So of course, towns react, and people in the community feel one way about it. But we're really not building for that purpose. And I would push on that idea Lexington's doing something really neat where they're saying, hey, you can build an ADU, you can Airbnb it for 5 years, and they cap it. And this gives folks the ability to potentially rent it out for a certain period of time to generate income to help pay for the costs. And then after 5 years, it flips over. Great, now there's a restriction, but it's given the homeowners an option to potentially help offset some of those costs and hopefully push people. Last year we were just talking, hey, only 9 of these got permitted last year. Maybe if there is a mechanism where someone has an option to short term, more will get built, but phase them into our community and get rid of those rental restrictions.
I was just going to point out, could you go back a slide?
Your presentation.
Yeah, my last slide, I think.
Sorry.
I want to show you how we got around the 1,200 square foot to 1,040 square foot.
Sorry,
problem.
lost it here.
And while Charles is looking for that, so we couldn't change the overall footprint of the barn with what was on the lower level. So to get it from 1,200 to a point that we thought the Board of Appeals would accept it at 1,040, still over the 1,000 limit that we were being given. What we did was we dropped the ceiling on an area below, just like a couple inches below 5 feet, which means it doesn't count as square footage, along the entire left side of the barn. That complicated the framing considerably. It complicated, for people who want to see it on the pictures, I have a handout later that you can look at. It complicated the gutter system, made the electrical a little more awkward, but that's what we had to do to get it past the permit. So our tenants, both First and Current, tended to put low bookshelves or use that area more for storage than for living space. But frankly, it made it a less viable unit, and I'm sorry that we were required to do that. Here's, you can see it on the model here. You see that drop down? Normally that roof line would have continued, and if it had continued like that, we would have been at 1,200. And you can see it up here, just barely. Thank you.
A really great, both of the ones we're building in Lexington right now, storage was a huge concern. So in one case we did an attic above, where they basically, it's not the full 1,000 square foot footprint, but they probably have 800 square feet of storage space. And then the other one, it's going down into a basement. Both of those aren't counting. It's kosher through the building department. There's obviously costs associated with that. Basement's a very expensive hole in the ground. The attic route is a bit cheaper, but that's how we were able to address the storage needs of folks.
I can project. No, you need to. And now you're next. Sorry. Okay.
Hi, just wondering if you have any thoughts on prefab construction and any insights from the panel here. Recommendations, things to think about, and things, how do they impact some of the information you've shared?
Absolutely. Well, I'll start there, and then I'll hand it off to you, maybe on the building side. We build exclusively in a factory, volumetric modular. So it's built in a factory, it comes, it's delivered on a truck, and it's craned in place. So we're building exclusively that way. We do stick build some things on site. Design and constraint wise, it's very, very minimal. There are restrictions of what we can ship down the road, both width and height. But when we get in there playing around with bedrooms and bathrooms and space, there's really not a lot of constraints. Actually, our first ADU here in Lexington, we had some fire separation hurdles we ran into. We were able to manipulate our box and get it still, everything built off-site and delivered. So yeah, for us, it's a great way to build. We're able to lock folks into a fixed price because we know, hey, this is exactly what it's going to cost for all of our off-site components and for us to finish it on-site. From a permitting perspective, everything that's built off-site in our factory is verified by a third-party engineer and stamped by a proxy in the state of Massachusetts. So permitting-wise, everything in the factory, and then it comes in and is delivered locally, and then it's under the building department's jurisdiction to inspect the fastening of that on the foundation, and then our final occupancy.
Typically, manufactured homes have to go through the state to be approved, and it's part of the process. And I don't think we have any problems with it, but it's just an added step for the process.
We have one thing about fire separation. So one of the reasons we wanted to do this project and preserve the barn was to keep the post and beam structure in place. And we wanted to be able to see that when we went into the garage, the four main pillars in the middle area of the garage. But we ran into a problem with fire separation because those pillars adjacent to them were these large 2x12 timbers that supported the floor upstairs. And so the town initially wanted us to plaster over everything, which obviously would have made the whole point of keeping the post and beam barn in place moot. Luckily, we found a compromise suggested, I think, by our builder, which is there's a transparent coating that you can put on that provides the same fire resistance quality as putting in 5/8 inch protective blue board or fireboard. And so you're required to put 2 coats on. As one more example of wanting to exceed the permit requirement, we put 3 coats on. And so when you walk into the barn on the lower level, you see all the beams. When you walk into the apartment above, you see all the beams.
I think I'll just add to the modular offsite construction component. Not every factory, not every supplier is the same. And obviously you have a component built offsite and finished onsite. And the key to that union is control and ownership of the whole thing. So how we succeed with that at Backyard ADUs is we're vertically integrated. We're building offsite and our team is finishing it versus you may go and have a great relationship with your offsite builder. They're then handing you over to a local GC to finish it. And we make sure we bridge that gap.
I'm failing to completely comprehend some of the numbers about square footage. So the 900 is the affordable, whatever, the act. I hear 1200 and then the 1040 and what are can you explain again what the actual Lexington limits are?
Yeah, of course. So the Affordable Homes Act protected use ADU is that 900 square foot cap. It's a little more complicated when it adds in or 50% of your home's GFA. Most likely in Lexington, people are going to be at that 900 square foot maximum for the state allowed ADU. For Lexington ADUs, we have 3 different types. If you are building one in your home, the first cap that's allowed with just a building permit is 1,000 square feet. If you are getting a special permit, you can do an expanded one in your home, and that can be up to 40% of your home's gross floor area. And then for a detached ADU, the maximum is 1,000 square feet as well. I will point out that Lexington versus the state does measure gross floor area differently. For the state, we are measuring from the interior of walls, so that wall thickness will not be included in your gross floor area. In Lexington, we measure from the exterior, and so that will be included. So if you're doing a Lexington ADU, that will be the difference in that calculation. So say you're building a 900 square foot ADU, that wall might add another 50 square feet. So really, for Lexington purposes, you're closer to 950. That will be the major difference in how you're going to calculate that GFA. But overall, we're all around 900 for the state and 1,000 for the town.
So where's Todd's?
So the 1,040 was a special variance, one of the variances we got from the Board of Appeals to exceed the 1,000. And it was a compromise from what we first presented to them at 1,200.
Yeah, so a variance is a public hearing process through the Board of Appeals, which requires you to provide proof that a hardship is caused by your lot shape, topography, or soil conditions. So those are harder to receive because of those conditions that you have to prove.
You have to dissuade people from doing that.
So mine's kind of a comment and a statement. So in the 1940s, my grandfather and grandmother moved into Lexington. And from that time until the 80s, my grandfather built over 100, which is not 100 houses in Lexington, all of which were about that 900 square feet. That were all the capes and ranches. I think the last count, we live in one of the last ones that he built that exists in this town. He also built a lot in Arlington and Winchester, or still exists in Arlington, and do with Winchester is the same type of thing. So I think you kind of find it funny now being talking about 900 square feet and being small when most of his things, and they last. We still have the original 1950s boiler in our house. But we're, as a family, at a crossroads right now. So we live in Lexington. My daughter and her boyfriend are looking to do tiny home, maybe up, that type of thing. And so we're at a crossroads in terms of whether we stay here, whether we move to another town, which is going to be most welcoming. How are we going to fit it in? One of the questions I have, in terms of like something that might be on wheels, what are the restrictions? What are the building permits requests around that? What was it?
Well, I was saying from like the research and stuff that I've done, my understanding are there like 3 primary types of like the tiny house radials, of the ones that you make with that are foundationed, ones that are on wheels that are more kind of like people will use them more as a trailer, like they're much more meant to be movable. And then the ones that we're looking for, or at least that's what seems to align with what we're looking for the most, is one that's on wheels, but then it's pretty much placed and then like locked in, so that for the most part it is there, it's not moving, it's not going to be blown away or anything like that. But again, maybe 5 years down the line, if we were to move, we could theoretically move it. But just questioning about permitting stuff when again there's not a formal foundation.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. The little house is now part of the 2021 building code, which the town or the state is adopting in full force as of July 1st. I'll be honest with you, I have not had a lot of questions for it and have not done any research in what the code actually says. Zoning, I'm going to leave that one up to you.
For zoning purposes, I look at a tiny home as the same way as a fully foundationed ADU. So you're still going to need to meet those setbacks, the height requirements, the same way that a house with a foundation would.
So one thing, because I know that things maybe have changed. I know things maybe have changed because there was a time when you couldn't bring, like, if you go up to Maine, if you go up to Maine over here, and you go by all of these building sites where they're building these narrower, as she said, not quite the tiny house, but still under that 900 square feet, where you weren't allowed by the state of Massachusetts to bring those here. So maybe that's changed.
And that's those 2 pieces: is zoning, does your town allow it, and then building, are you meeting this set of standards? And there is I haven't read it myself either, the tiny house code standards, that actual structure. Do you want to follow up that? And I'll finish up.
The only other thing I would say, we have to talk to the plumbing inspector. And how do you get the waste from the tiny house into the system? It was mentioned that the ADU had to go through the existing house. So that would be another thing to check out and make sure that it can be accomplished.
And that's often the big sticking point with these is, hey, maybe it is allowed from a zoning perspective, maybe it is built by an approved folks, but hey, I'm on site, if I get a tie into the septic, do upgrades need to be made. People often say, hey, what about a composting toilet? Great, that's solving one issue, but where is your shower and sink water and gray water going? And those issues. We get these calls all the time. Part of our, the nomenclature here is like, well, what's a tiny house? What's a small house? What's an ADU? What's a tiny house? The other thing I always think about is costs as well. Even the tiny house on wheels these days, especially I've heard people call it like the park model tiny house, so like oversized. They're still expensive, especially if, hey, I need to upgrade my electrical service and figure out plumbing, connections, etc. So I'm often trying to put that hat on to be, well, what am I going to spend on this tiny house on wheels? The bank also typically doesn't like to finance that because it may roll away. Versus, hey, if I'm actually building this dwelling on a foundation, it does cost more. I still have to meet all these standards, but what is the value I'm adding that property in general? And obviously you can't pick up that ADU and move it, but you've now added value to this property. So if your family does decide to move, how is that sort of looked at in the market? So that's where I always try to put those two fully on a scale to be able to compare apples to apples, so you can make the right decision. That works for you.
What are the practical differences between two-family and ADU? Size comes to mind, but we just heard an example of a principal dwelling that's 900 square feet. So if we build another 900 square foot at that point, or just basically a two-family, which I'm fine with. I'm just curious to know if there's a distinction that we should be thinking about.
So really the distinction is unfortunately just that size aspect of it, in that it's subordinate in size. The state ADU law does state that it's 900 square feet or 50% of the home's GFA, whichever is smaller. So that 900 square foot home would not be allowed for a protected use ADU to build a 900 square foot one. It could only be as large as 50% of that 900 square feet. So that is one way that can be regulated and limited. Other than that, we don't have a huge distinction in that two-family versus ADU, except for that an ADU is supposed to be subordinate and accessory to the main house.
And I would say that the gross floor area, as the state defines it, does include a basement. So I was worried when they were putting these rules in place, those folks with a 1,200 square foot ranch, maybe hamstrung to say, hey, I can only build 50%, but luckily we can count that basement. So there are some nuances there. But I've had like real estate agents ask me this all the time, and it's like, for all intensive for your purposes, it is now two dwellings. It is sort of a two-family. I get asked a lot about like taxes. How is the town assessor going to look at it? Some towns will say, hey, we're just going to tax it as if it's a two-family. It's zoning-wise not a two-family, but for our ease of accounting, it's that, or just doing the incremental square footage. So a couple different layers of how does that look.
This is just a quick question, do I qualify or not? I'm looking to possibly do a basement conversion. There's 7-foot ceilings there. Does that automatically take me out?
No, not up to 7.5.
Okay, I don't know why I thought there was an 8-foot
No.
ceiling
The
requirement.
building code requires habitable rooms to have a ceiling height of 7 feet.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If you say that, could you use the microphone? They couldn't hear you back there.
Building code requires that habitable spaces in a home has to have 7-foot high ceilings.
Thank you.
And those examples I talked about earlier of storage, the attic storage in one or the basement in the other, we just keep our ceiling height at like 6'8", 6'10", and hey, that space is there. It's not that habitable for
Thank you.
That was actually an issue in the barn where the existing flooring on the second floor, if you'd walked on it before we did the project, you would have hit your head. So forget 7 feet, 6'1", you're in trouble. 5. So what we did was we dropped the floor in the barn by having it connected to the sides of support beams instead of 2x12 sitting on top of them, which reduced the clearance in the garage, which I didn't like. So we dropped the floor of the garage 17 inches and got more clearance down there, but those were issues for us.
I just want to mention also that for GFA calculation purposes, basements under 6'8" are what we will not count towards GFA. And then the 7 foot is when it's allowed to be habitable.
I think this will be the last question. We're getting up to closing time, 11 o'clock, so last question.
I'd like to ask a question about the Conservancy. We're coming from Virginia, but our son lives here and has a home where he's thinking of building a granny cottage. And they are on Conservancy. In Virginia Beach, we can go to the planning department and do what they call a preliminary plan review and have them look at the feasibility before we ever talk to an architect or a builder. Is that an option here in Lexington?
So it wouldn't be through directly with the planning board, but the building department which also houses zoning and conservation, is always available to help you. You can come in, you can call or email. We're willing to go through all of our history records for a property, through the conservation records that we have and the GIS for that property, and give you any of the information that we have, any of the concerns we may see, and help you with what is the possibility of this working.
And we do the same thing with that builder hat on too, of, what are all these layers in the town, and what might some costs be for this size structure to help people back into a ballpark price, so they can understand both, hey, what can I do?
I want to thank Charles for organizing this today and for lining up all these great speakers. I learned so much today, I can't tell you. I appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us today. So, and I would just like to remark that we have not yet got a topic for our May First Friday, TBD. I will put it out as soon as we have it available. I want to thank all of you for coming today, and have a good weekend.